Chapter 3, Project Chronos, January 11th, 2111, 1600 hours, 37 minutes, 57 seconds. Cables lay everywhere. Thick power lines coiled like sleeping animals, fiber bundles draped over benches, thinner leads tagged and retagged as the design evolved faster than the labeling could keep up. Neil was halfway up a ladder, bracing himself with one boot hooked around a rung while he fed a cable through an overhead conduit. "Hold that there," he said. She did with steady hands. No hesitation. Neil climbed down, crossed the floor, then climbed another ladder on the opposite side of the rig. The frame itself was still embarrassingly crude. Raw titanium trusses bolted together in a geometry that was more functional than elegant. Coils hung in careful suspension, hand-wound, hand-measured, each one maintaining just enough separation to keep the math honest. It was late, past the point where the building's vibrations softened and the background chatter of other labs died away. "So," Neil said, tightening a clamp, "you asked earlier why people came here." She passed him another tool. "I know why. I asked how you remember it." He paused, considering his words as he climbed back down. "I remember fear," he said finally, "but quiet fear, not panic." He gestured vaguely upward. People talked about places where the air didn't change its mind every month, no violent seasons, no lung burn. She nodded. "Predictability." "Yeah, that's the word," he said, grabbing a wire crimp as he talked. "Not safety, just something you could plan around." She leaned against a bench, arms folded loosely. "I grew up hearing it framed like destiny, like this place was inevitable." Neil snorted. "Nothing about it felt inevitable at the time." "You were about what, 10, 12 when it started?" Judith guessed. Neil thought for a moment. 11. She nodded. "Old enough to remember what it was like before." "Old enough to miss it," Neil clarified. Neil bent down to grab an end of one of the larger cables they had just earlier finished capping all of the ends off with solder connections. Judith took his cue and grabbed the other end, and they walked it over toward one of the ladders. They dubbed this large subcomponent they were assembling the temporal capacitor. If testing passed, this would become the heart of the loom, the engine that would propel them closer to taming time itself. "So what do you remember people saying back then, when they started coming here?" Judith asked. "Not much poetry in it," he huffed softly. "Mostly just, the air doesn't hurt." He was plugging each connector into its mating component as he recalled the past. "My parents tried staying farther north before we got here, thought it would stabilize. And it didn't." She completed his thought. "Toss me those zip ties." Neil continued his work on the cable splices as he continued. "No, seasons went wrong. Heat that wouldn't leave, cold that came early and stayed too long. You could feel it in your lungs." He paused, tying cables tightly together under the rig. "When word got out about this place, near the equator, inland from Lima, tucked up against the Andes, people talked like it was destiny." Judith instinctively handed him a roll of electrical tape, which he took from her without even looking. "Stable air, fewer particulates, no seasonal whiplash," she said. "Sure. I'm sure that's how it reads in the history books now, anyways," he confirmed. The end-of-shift alert chimed, soft, almost polite. Somewhere far off, doors opened, lockers shut, footsteps faded. No one came to check on them. Neither of them moved from what they were doing, as if shifts were irrelevant for them. Neil climbed once more, fed the last cable through, and descended for good. The rig stood there now, wires tethered, coils aligned, ugly and earnest. While he was wringing out the last of the cables on the titanium ring, Judith worked on connecting all of the ends of the bundles that were laying on the ground. "So everything we were told was true then," she concluded. "No." He tightens the last fastener and leaned back. "This place, it was a refuge that only decided to become a city once everywhere else failed." Judith watched him for a thoughtful second. "That must have been strange, watching it happen." He smirked. "It's been even stranger watching people forget it ever did." With everything ticked and tied and done for the day, Neil turned to Judith, who was staring at the capacitor. "Want to see what this baby can do?" he asked. She turned toward him, and for a moment he forgot the machine entirely. Judith Hawking, under the lab's harsh lighting, didn't look delicate. She looked alive. Dark brown hair pulled back loosely, a few strands escaped and catching the light. Brown eyes sharp and curious, always a half-second ahead of the room. There was warmth there, too, something unarmoured, still intact. Hope, maybe. He hadn't seen that much lately. She exuded it. And suddenly, unhelpfully, he saw her beauty. Not in spite of the age difference between them, not despite the hierarchy, but because she met him exactly where he lived, in the work, in the questions, in the hunger to build something that mattered. He realized, with a quiet jolt, that he was already in trouble. She caught his drift instantly. One eyebrow rose. "Well," she said, "you going to show me, or are we just admiring the scaffolding?" "Right. Focus, Neil," he thought to himself. He moved to the control box and flipped the main switch. Click. Nothing. Neil frowned, toggled it off and on again. Still nothing. From behind him he heard her footsteps. He turned to see Judith kneel by a heavy floor unit, a thick cable trailing from it, its large, bulky connector unmistakably unplugged. She lifted it with both hands and shoved it home into the floor receptacle with a solid thunk. "You might do well to plug it in first, Dr. Tyson," she smiled, then winked. Neil exhaled a laugh. "Right. What would I do without you, Dr. Hawking?" He flipped the switch again. This time the machine answered. A low rising hum rolled through the truss. Blue light flickered. Erratic at first, almost nervous, then snapped into jagged arcs that danced between the coils. The air itself seemed to stiffen, as if resisting something new. Sparks leapt and recoiled, not random but searching, tracing invisible contours dictated by equations still half theoretical. It was chaotic, unrefined, beautiful. Judith stepped closer without realizing it, breath caught. Neil felt it too, the sense that the room had just become smaller, tighter, more intimate. The temporal capacitor roared softly. Alive now, insisting on attention. They stood there together, silent, staring at the first real heartbeat of Project Kronos. Not polished, not safe, but undeniably real.